Let's talk about Zoltan Shield piercing. Now, this has been covered already by Twinge in one of his excellent tips and tricks videos, but I am going to go over it again since if I don't, the rest of this video will be really hard to follow. So we have our glaive beam here, and I'm just going to place it so that the very end of the beam is entering the weapons room, like so. And what will happen is the glaive beam starts to fire. There is a small delay. And then another small delay. It does 3 damage. That's the base damage of the beam. Once. Twice. And then you see the beam hasn't finished firing yet. It's still got a little bit of distance to go. But the Zoltan Shield is down. So it's going to do 2 damage to weapons. Like so. And that makes this fight completely safe. Now if you aim the beam even more carefully, you can actually hit 2 rooms. So in this case we're going to hit weapons and the empty room above weapons. Worth noting that we're not hitting piloting, even though the beam is going through piloting, because by the time the Zoltan Shield is down, the beam has already entered piloting, so that hit check has already happened. But we will hit this room and this room. And you can see we did more hull damage, we only left them with 3 hull. However, this is actually a mistake. You should not be doing this against this ship, and I'll show you why. This enemy can run away if you knock them down to 4 hull or less. So you see their FTL is charging, and they're going to get away. There's nothing we can do about this now. Our glaive beam is just not going to be ready in time, not even close. And they get away. So if you are going to hit a second room, make sure it's a system room, not an empty room. Now I'll just show you how to do this the best way. If you come in at a sharp angle like this kind of angle, that's actually not very good because you're going to hit, in this case, piloting early. The glaive beam is actually likely to enter it a bit too soon. So you want to come in as close to diagonal as possible, something like that. This does normally take quite a few tries, I just got lucky there. And the other thing to notice here is that we're approaching from a direction that means we hit weapons after piloting. So I can do it like this. I'm shading it into weapons at the last possible moment, and we're hitting piloting slightly earlier. The benefit of that is that if you get this slightly wrong, you might miss piloting because it's such a small distance. But you're definitely hitting weapons. If you went the other direction, if you went into oxygen, for example, then you'd actually be hitting weapons first, and you'd have to be extra careful not to mess it up. But we'll see here we hit both rooms. And there's an interesting behaviour where they actually swap. What's going on here is that when you damage piloting, it will always pull a second crew if there is a crew member not already occupied with a task such as repairing. And then that crew member becomes the new pilot, and this guy's going to go to weapons. So we destroyed piloting and we occupied their crew with repairs. Now in this case they're not trying to run, but if they were, they wouldn't have time to get away. Alright, they've decided to run now. I think they left it a little bit too late. You can also use this tactic much later in the game. I found this out a little while ago when I was doing a Zoltan A shieldless run. And this particular enemy, a Zoltan bomber, is very much a trouser filling moment if you don't have any shields. Because not only do you have to destroy the Zoltan shield before you can do any damage, you also have to take it down before you can use your hacking. The usual tactic here would be to use your Flak to take down the Zoltan shields so that you hold your glaive beam in reserve, as otherwise you're going to have to wait for 2 whole charges of the glaive beam before you can do any damage. The problem with this is partly that it delays your volley at least a bit, but also that the enemy ship has evasion, and we need 5 out of 6 shots to hit on the first 2 volleys for this to be effective. You see, they've still got 1 point of Zoltan Shield left. What do we do? Do we fire the 3rd Flak volley, and then yes, it could take down that and another 2 potentially if everything hits? We could do that, or do we wait for a 4th Flak volley? It's kind of hard to say. Wait and see. And now, because they still had a Zoltan Shield and one of our Flak shots missed, it's only taken down 1 shield, so we could do 1 point of damage to weapons and drones, which is probably correct here. And of course we hack weapons. What we could do instead is combine the flak with the trick that we saw just a moment ago. Now in a real game you'd need to be looking at what the beam drone was doing, but I'm not going to worry here. If possible, the ideal time to cloak is just after the flak has fired. So we're going to get a bit more value out of our cloak, hopefully, in this case. Since we're delaying enemy weapons, we're hoping they won't have a chance to shoot at us at all. And we needed 2 out of those 3 flak shots to hit for this trick to be reasonably, moderately reliable. It's still not going to be completely reliable because it depends on the time that it takes the flak to reach the enemy ship, which is variable based on the angle of approach. If I recall correctly, the travel time for flak, including the initial firing delay, is between 1.48 seconds and 2.23 seconds. That's against any ship from an NG Scout to the flagship, but just to give you an idea of how long it takes. So there isn't a perfect timing. It's possible for the flak to get there too soon or too late. What I found to be the best timing is to move crew by 2.5 tiles. Standard crew like this Zoltan or a human, not something slower or faster. I'm going to fire the flak and let the Zoltan get into the middle of that door, and then I start firing Glaive beam. Now again, the placement here needs to be diagonal, and you really want this to be as late as possible. Just like so. Glaive beam takes down Zoltan Shield, but it's very close. Flak is hitting, and then we're going to do 3 damage to shields and drones. Oh, we should also be hacking, by the way. I'm a bit late on that. Let's hit the note button. And now this fight has become very safe. We're back into our usual shielder strats of hack cloak. And I can cloak that. So the weapons are not charging. And now they are toast. Now, even if your first volley of flak missed entirely, you could still use this tactic. So what I'm going to do here is just not fire my flak to simulate our first volley missing. Speed it along a bit. And I'm going to use exactly the same timing. Or near as, damn it. I might just fire slightly earlier. And now, what can happen here is if all the flak hits, then at least we do 1 damage to drones. And again, we can hack weapons. So this is not so bad. Or if we get really lucky, then this happens. And the timing is perfect. We do the full damage. We can also use a laser to help bring down the Zoltan Shields. One thing I forgot to mention, by the way, is that this weapon needs to be far forwards on your ship. If it's in a slot back here, then that could affect the travel time. And with a burst laser, we really need to hit 2 out of 3 shots here. And we'll just wait a bit. Okay, so the best timing that I've seen here is to just fire a laser like that, and then use your beam in the same way. And if everything goes well, the Zoltan Shield will go down just before the first laser hits, and then the second and possibly the third laser will hit. Third laser is not guaranteed, but we just managed that, not for shields but for drones. The timing of laser weapons can be slightly different. This whole laser 2, for example, has speed 90 rather than 60, so it's 1.5 times faster. And you may need to adjust the timing very slightly. What I'm going to do with this one, because it's extra fast, is fire the Glaive beam at the same time. Like so. And you see we actually get all 3 shots in before the glaive beam reaches the drone room. That's enough Zoltan Shield piercing for today. I think my head's going to explode if I try to explain any more of it right now, but we'll save the rest of it for the next episode.